What do you get when you mix a military lawyer with a longtime senator known for his surprising political pivots? Meet Lindsey Graham. Hey everyone, I'm Leah, feeling curious today and ready to dive into this intriguing topic.
And I'm Garrett, feeling pretty excited to explore this one with Leah here on Laid Back Learning.
Today we're exploring the fascinating life and career of Lindsey Graham, the long-serving U.S. Senator known for his complex political journey and influence.
Okay, quick story. I remember watching that viral moment when Donald Trump, who at the time was the 2016 Republican frontrunner and later became president, read Lindsey Graham's personal cell phone number on TV. I was like, no way, that's a wild move. It sent me down a rabbit hole of political media moments, and honestly, it made me wonder how two people could go from trading insults to golfing together and shaping policy. That kind of blew my mind.
Let's open the book on this. Lindsey Olin Graham was a prominent U.S. Senator from South Carolina, serving from 2003 until his passing in 2026. He brought a rare mix to the job, coming in as an attorney and a military lawyer from the Air Force's JAG Corps, which is the Judge Advocate General's Corps, basically the military's legal branch. He often described himself as a Reagan-style Republican and is frequently labeled neoconservative, which meant he supported a proactive U.S. role abroad, alliances like NATO, and robust defense spending.
Imagine a legal eagle who flies into the turbulent skies of politics, navigating storms with unexpected turns. That's kind of Lindsey Graham. He was born in 1955 in central South Carolina to parents who ran a small business, a combination restaurant and bar. He became the first in his family to attend college, and after both his parents died when he was young, he became legal guardian to his 13-year-old sister. The Air Force helped him stay near home so he could keep that responsibility, which he later said shaped his sense of duty.
From there, he earned a law degree at the University of South Carolina and went active duty in the Air Force JAG. He served as a defense attorney and then became the Air Force's chief prosecutor in Europe, which is a huge responsibility. He later returned to South Carolina to practice law, stepped into local government legal roles, and then into elected office. That's the quick sketch before we dig deeper. Let's set the scene for his early days. Growing up in a small South Carolina town, working-class environment, and then taking guardianship of his younger sister after losing both parents. Why does that matter so much to understanding him? Because it shows up later whenever he talks about responsibility and service. That personal story is right there under the surface of his decisions.
Then comes the JAG path. In the early 1980s, he's a defense attorney at Shaw Air Force Base in South Carolina. In 1984, he's featured on 60 Minutes, the news show, during a segment that exposed problems with Air Force drug testing procedures. Not your typical day for a junior military lawyer. He later moves to Frankfurt, West Germany, and becomes the Air Force's chief prosecutor in Europe, managing big, complicated cases across jurisdictions.
He returns to South Carolina in 1989, joins a private practice in Walhalla, and serves as assistant county attorney and city attorney. In 1992, he wins a $5 million medical malpractice case that really boosts his visibility. That same year, he runs for and wins a seat in the South Carolina House of Representatives, where he focuses on judiciary issues and, interestingly, proposes term limits.
He also proposed a bill back then to ban gays and lesbians from serving in the South Carolina Army National Guard, which did not pass. It gives a snapshot of his early cultural conservatism, even though some of his positions would shift over time. Meanwhile, he stayed connected to military service in the Air National Guard and later the Reserve.
During the Gulf War period, 1990 to 1991, he was recalled to active duty as a judge advocate to brief pilots on the laws of war. He was clear that he never deployed to combat zones. That precision, for me, matters in how we talk about service and the risks involved.
In 1994, he jumps to the U.S. House, winning a historically Democratic district for Republicans for the first time since the 1870s. He stakes out committee slots in international relations and education, And he occasionally bucks party leadership, like participating in a leadership challenge against House Speaker Newt Gingrich, who led the Republican Revolution.
On the House Judiciary Committee, he's front and center for the Bill Clinton impeachment. In 1997, he co-sponsors the initial resolution to explore impeachment, and in 1998, he votes to open the formal inquiry. Then he does something unusual for a Republican on that committee. He supports 3 of 4 proposed articles but opposes one of the perjury counts, which shows he was weighing each claim separately. He later serves as an impeachment manager in the Senate trial, which means he helped present the case to the Senate.
Also, in the late 1990s, he's promoted to lieutenant colonel in the Air Force Reserve. There's a controversy reported by The Hill about his website describing him as a Desert Shield or Desert Storm veteran. He responded that he never deployed and wasn't a war hero, basically trying to clear up any misimpression. We'll come back to that as a flashpoint.
He sponsors the Unborn Victims of Violence Act in 1999. It passes the House, and a similar bill later becomes law in 2004. By then, he's on a glide path to run statewide for the Senate.
Right? And in 2001, former Senator Bob Dole, a past Republican presidential nominee, becomes chairman of Graham's Senate Campaign Steering Committee. That's a big boost heading into 2002.
In 2002, he wins the U.S. Senate seat vacated by Strom Thurmond, a long-serving South Carolina senator. Early on, he supports major national security measures. After 9/11, he had voted for the Patriot Act and the 2001 AUMF, which stands for Authorization for Use of Military Force, basically permitting the president to use military force against those responsible for 9/11. In 2002, he also votes for the Iraq War resolution. He pledges to serve only 2 terms in the Senate, which becomes a thread we'll revisit.
His military and legal worlds intersect again. In 2004, he's promoted to colonel in the Air Force Reserve at a White House ceremony with President George W. Bush, then the commander-in-chief. A lower court said it was okay for him to serve as a military judge while he was a senator, but in 2006, the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces set that aside, saying it was improper, largely on separation of powers concerns. In simple terms, it's tricky when a lawmaker holds a judicial role in the military system.
He does brief active duty reserve stints in Iraq in 2007 and works in Afghanistan in 2009 on detainees and rule of law issues. In 2014, he receives the Bronze Star Medal for meritorious service tied to advisory legal work from 2009 to 2014. Quick note, the Bronze Star can be awarded for non-combat merit, and in his case, it recognized sustained legal and detention oversight contributions.
Foreign policy is his signature. He partners closely with John McCain, the late senator and 2008 GOP presidential nominee, and Joe Lieberman, a former Democratic vice presidential nominee turned independent. The trio gets nicknamed the Three Amigos, always pushing for a strong U.S. role abroad, support for allies like Israel and Ukraine, and backing NATO as a force multiplier.
Domestically, 2014 is a big political test. Facing rumblings from Tea Party-aligned conservatives, he builds a formidable statewide operation with regional offices and lots of precinct captains. He wins his primary handily, and then the general election over State Senator Brad Hutto. That Graham machine becomes a theme in how he defends his seat.
Then, the Trump chapter. In 2015, he calls Donald Trump a jackass after Trump downplays John McCain's war record. Trump reads Graham's phone number on live TV. Graham blasts Trump's proposed Muslim entry ban as xenophobic. He runs for president in 2016, but drops out, and he doesn't vote for Trump in the general. By mid-2016, he's even predicting disaster if Trump is nominated.
In 2017, the relationship pivots. Graham says he wants to be relevant and build influence on foreign policy and defense. They play golf, they talk often. In 2018, he endorses Trump for re-election and then delivers a fiery defense of Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh during the confirmation hearings, calling the process the most unethical sham he had seen. For context, Brett Kavanaugh was a nominee to the Supreme Court, and Christine Blasey Ford had accused him of sexual assault, which he denied.
He chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee from 2019 to 2021, helping move judicial nominees. He tells the New York Times Magazine he supports Trump to be relevant and, yes, help his own 2020 re-election chances. He even suggests Donald Trump Jr. ignore a Senate subpoena, drawing criticism. He defends Trump against charges of racism, including the go back comments about Democratic congresswomen, but he breaks with Trump on pulling U.S. troops from northern Syria in 2019, calling it risky.
On impeachment, he says he has made up his mind and won't be a fair juror in 2019, opposing witnesses. In 2020, he defeats Democrat Jamie Harrison in a heavily funded race. After the election, he urges Trump not to concede, contributes to legal efforts, and cites a Project Veritas affidavit from Richard Hopkins, a postal worker in Pennsylvania, about supposed ballot backdating. Later audio raises doubts about those claims. He also calls Brad Raffensperger, Georgia's Secretary of State, asking about signature verification. Raffensperger and aide Gabriel Sterling say the questions sounded like invalidating ballots. Graham denied that. A local prosecutor, Fonnie Willis in Fulton County, reviews the call as part of a broader probe. January 6, 2021, is a turning point. After the Capitol attack, he says, "Count me out. Enough is enough," and affirms Joe Biden, the Democratic nominee who became president, was lawfully elected. Then he votes not guilty in Trump's impeachment and later votes against creating a January 6 commission. There's a lot of tension in those decisions.
In mid-2021, the New York Times reports he called Biden after the election to mend fences and said he pushed for a Hunter Biden special counsel to appease Trump supporters. His spokesman disputes parts of that story. Either way, it shows his unusual position, maintaining lines with both parties' leaders, even in a very polarized time.
Fast forward. He appears at Trump's first primetime 2024 campaign rally. He still supports a muscular foreign policy. He also tangles with Trump in 2024 over abortion, pressing for a federal ban while Trump declines to back one nationally. He travels to Nebraska urging a winner-take-all electoral college change, which doesn't happen. He calls Kamala Harris, then the Democratic nominee, after Biden stepped aside, the most radical nominee in history, and after the election, he calls Trump's victory the biggest comeback in American history.
In early 2025, he lines up a strong team for his 2026 re-election, reports big fundraising, and then surprisingly criticizes some of President Trump's early moves, like pardons for January 6 offenders and removing security details for John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, who were former National Security Advisor and Secretary of State. He says firing a bunch of inspectors general didn't follow the 30-day notice requirement, even if technically allowed. So he's still willing to push back on process and national security norms.
At this time, he also chairs the Senate Budget Committee, extending his influence into fiscal matters. Later in March 2025, he gets Trump's endorsement for the 2026 race. In June 2026, he wins the Republican primary again. Then, in July 2026, he passes away while serving. A special primary is set to replace him as the GOP nominee. His career in Congress spans 31 years, from the House to the Senate.
Legacy-wise, he's known for interventionist foreign policy, support for allies like Israel and Ukraine, and a belief in alliances. He's also ranked in the top third for bipartisanship in 2023 by the Lugar Center, which tracks cross-party cooperation. But there are controversies, shifting stances on Trump, the Georgia call, and not following his early self-imposed term limit pledges. It all adds up to a complicated picture.
I keep coming back to how he cast himself as pragmatic, trying to keep influence on big national security choices. That can rub people the wrong way when it looks like a reversal, but it can also be strategic when the goal is to shape outcomes. It's a tension that never really leaves his story.
Right, and that's something to chew on, huh? The mix of principle and pragmatism in a job that constantly tests both.
Let's introduce a flashpoint. Back in 1998, The Hill reported that Graham's website described him as a desert shield or desert storm veteran. Critics said that phrasing could mislead people into thinking he deployed to the Gulf War. Graham said he never deployed and wasn't a war hero, and he said any misrepresentation would make him unfit. So here's the question. In public life, how damaging is it if a description leaves a misleading impression, even if the person later clarifies it?
I'll go first. I think intent matters, but so does clarity. If a label like Desert Storm Veteran is used, people might assume combat deployment. If the intent was to highlight recall to active duty and law of war briefings during that period, then say exactly that. Public records can be messy, and sites get updated, but with military service, precision matters because it's tied to risk and sacrifice. So I'd say the best practice is ultra clarity, right up front.
I agree on precision, and I also think consequences hinge on how fast and how clearly the person corrects the record. With Graham, he emphasized that he never deployed, which is important, but I still question the initial phrasing. Real talk, in politics, words become identity. If the headline version can mislead, it can stick, even after a correction.
Totally. And there's also the human factor. Campaigns move fast, third parties repackage bios, and mistakes happen. But like you said, the stakes are high in how quickly and directly you clean it up. That's the difference between a lingering controversy and a minor footnote.
So we land here. He clarified, and supporters pointed to his recall and briefings. Critics argued the initial wording could be read as combat service. The takeaway is that with military credentials, the standard for clarity should be extra high. It protects the person and the institution.
On the pop culture front, you've got his early 60 Minutes appearance in 1984, which kind of foreshadowed his comfort in national media. Then decades later, that explosive moment with Trump reading his phone number, which went viral. And in between, the three amigos nickname for him, McCain and Lieberman, gives you this shorthand for hawkish, globe-trotting senators with cameras in tow.
What if he had honored his pledge to serve only 2 Senate terms starting in 2002? That means he'd have left before the 2018 Kavanaugh confirmation, the 2020 election disputes, and his 2025 Budget Committee chairmanship. Without him in those moments, how different does the arc look?
If he had stepped down after 2 terms, so around 2014, the Judiciary Committee scene in 2018 changes. No Graham speech, no viral pivot moment. Another Republican likely takes that spotlight, but would it have had the same energy? Not sure. In South Carolina, you lose his seniority. That matters for federal dollars, for committee leverage, for national attention on the state's priorities. The bench would have reshuffled earlier, and his carefully built machine might have handed the baton to a very different figure.
And on 2020, without him, the Senate conversation about post-election litigation and the Georgia call dynamic shifts. Maybe that particular flashpoint never arrives in the same way. His voice also wouldn't be in the room when the party navigates its stance after January 6. In a broader sense, the idea of a Republican bridging hawkish foreign policy across party lines loses a known messenger at a key time.
Right? And by 2025 and 2026, there's no Budget Committee chair, Graham, so another senator sets the fiscal agenda and the hearing tone. That would ripple through debates about spending, deficits, and defense budgets. It's a reminder how one person's tenure can tweak both the style and the substance of congressional life.
Stay curious, everyone.
And keep exploring with us. See you next time on Laid Back Learning.